So in this video, we're going to be talking about social mobility or the lack of social mobility in England. And so what social mobility is your ability to climb up the ladder from, say, if you're a lower working class person into, a medium working class person into an upper working class person into the lower middle class. So your ability to move up the ladder, maybe buy a house, a new car, those sorts of things. Social mobility allows you to move up the ladder, usually by working hard, chasing promotions or qualifications. Typically, that's how it's done. So, say you work at, say, Tesco's, you do the tills and the shelves and stuff, then you can get promoted to being maybe an assistant manager. I don't know the exact progressions at Tesco's, but say you get promoted to being assistant manager, things like that. You get promoted to being a manager, and that way you can move up the ladder, and you hopefully earn more money and things like that. But obviously, not everyone can get the promotion, and people have other commitments apart from chasing promotion. So that's kind of like one of the points of social mobility is like your ability to move up the chain, basically. And so the government has failed in improving social mobility, and this is not just Boris to point out. This is a systemic issue. This is with May and also Cameron as well, because Cameron was in charge during this era. That's how far back this goes. So keep paying attention. Government progress on improving the life chances of disadvantaged people in England has been disappointing, according to its own watchdog. The Social Mobility Commission says ministers have only delivered on 23% of its proposals since 2013, and it warns in a report that the coronavirus crisis could destroy any gains that have been made. Whoosh. So that less than a quarter percentage of success that you've had since 2013 could be gone. Just like that, gone. So the government said it was committed to spreading opportunity and ensuring no one was left behind. A spokesman for the government said it was pleased the Commission recognised progress in such areas as improving life chances for poorer people and keeping disadvantaged pupils in education for longer. So your success, so all you've done is you've only delivered on 23% of your proposals since 2013. So say if we're going to be very kind to them and say 2014, January you should have got this thing kicked off, right? You've had 6 years and you've only achieved less than a quarter of your aims, and you're like trying to take a victory lap over it, saying we're pleased the Commission has recognised progress in such areas. It's taken you 6 years to do less than a quarter. So how long are we supposed to wait for you to get these things on? 18 years? 24 years for you to do all of these things? It's embarrassing, to be honest, that they're taking a victory lap over this, but I guess this government will take a victory lap over anything. But the Commission warned that the coronavirus was already having a huge impact on those from disadvantaged backgrounds and will only get worse as the recession bites harder, which is true. Like, once the pandemic ends, we're not even out of the woods. We're not out of the woods. It is now really important to have a coherent, coordinated plan to help the most vulnerable in the months and years ahead, said the Commission's Joint Deputy Stephen Cooper. They don't do coherent plans, this government. They just don't. Even May didn't do it either. And I can't remember much of Cameron's tenure. So maybe we'll give Cameron slightly the benefit of the doubt here. But the Commission says more progress is needed, including poverty. 600,000 children, more children are living in relative poverty than in 2012, and this is projected to increase further due to benefit changes and coronavirus. It says in its report, schools only 16 only 24.7% of disadvantaged children get a good grade. Get a good pass in English and maths at GCSE compared with 49.9% of other pupils. So saying that there's a clear problem with disadvantaged pupils, which makes sense. Given that their home lives might be more difficult, they will get less help outside of school as well. Maybe their parents will be less able to help them because their parents may be busy or working or may not have the expertise to actually help them. Employment: half all adults from the poorest backgrounds receive no training at all after leaving school. Health life expectancy is falling for women in the most deprived 10% of areas, the Commissioner said, and health inequalities linked this to socioeconomic backgrounds that have been exposed by the coronavirus. So the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary Kate Green said the Commission's report exposes a government with no interest of levelling up Britain. That's the phrase the government uses, levelling up the country and stuff. Is an appalling record of mismanagement and indifference to the life chances of working class families and their children. And so you can see from what this report points out is that there are massive systemic issues which haven't been addressed. And so if we go here to some of the analysis, the Commission was set up by Parliament. Although couched in temperate language, this year's report lambasts ministers for their failure to put cross-government measures in place and turn warm words into reality. The Department for Work and Pensions is singled out in particular criticism, which absolutely they should be, because they're the ones doing a lot of the damage. Benefit cuts are increasing child poverty, commissions say, and the DWP appears to have done little work to ensure it is not making matters worse. The government will speak on its commitment to improve life chances for all, but today's report says the pandemic means social mobility has never been more important, and it will be the poor and young that suffer the most. So that philosophy of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, work harder, it just doesn't work, because saving money in this economy is so difficult. Saving, to save up, to because you're constantly spending it. Food prices are on the up, wages aren't keeping up with things like that, and so it makes it very difficult to save money, to save up for a deposit or save up for a car, to level up your own skills, to take online courses. They're quite cheap if you catch them on sale. I think at Udemy does them, but to get things like driving lessons and things like that, it's very expensive to do. And if you can't do these things, you can't improve yourself, your own skills, and you can't move up the ladder. The Social Mobility Commission set up in 2013 by David Cameron's coalition government, but its chairman, former Labour Health Secretary Alan Milburn, quit in 2017, saying Theresa May's government was unable to devote the necessary energy and focus on the social mobility agenda, and that's absolutely correct. She failed. She was happy to let Chris Grayling spend money on ferries that didn't a ferry company that had no ferries, but when it came to actually helping people, they just wouldn't do it. And this is indicative of not just the three in charge, Cameron, May and Johnson. This goes throughout the Conservative Party. So now, in an audit of government departments, commissioners found that no or very little action has been taken in England and on 31% of proposals it has made since it was set up, most of which has been applied to England only. There have been insufficient progress on the 46% of its proposals, and strong progress had been made or the proposal delivered in only 23% of cases. So you've only achieved 23% of your targets from 2013, which is it's just shocking. It's just shocking. It really is. And so some success, so extending 30 hours free childcare for working parents, working the equivalent of 8 hours a week or more, and more funding for adult education are among the proposals the Commission says have been ignored by government. So these things will help working people back into work if you give people access to more free childcare, which is I think something they do in the Scandinavian countries. Then you can go back into work. You don't have the reason of I need to look after my child or I can't afford childcare. They will go back into work and be more productive members of society, economically speaking. And so it's just ridiculous that the government, like the business world runs on the phrase speculate to accumulate, right? But the government runs on the opposite, which is we ain't going to spend money. Are you stupid? And so if you spend money here on things like free childcare, those parents can go back into work, and therefore they will, help out businesses or whatever. If you don't do this, especially if they're single parents, they don't have anyone to look after their children, especially because we don't live in the old sort of, big family houses anymore. People live in flats on their own. How, what are you supposed to do? You can't leave your kid on your own if their kids are below a certain age, and if your kid's not that bright when it comes to like things like looking after themselves, you can't do it. And so it's beyond stupid, this government sometimes. Like the fact that they won't put some money in and speculate to accumulate, it just doesn't make sense. So Alan Milburn's successor, Dame Martina Milburn, is that his wife? Who is not related to the... Oh, okay. Fair enough, that answers my question. To the former Labour MP, told the ministers in April she was standing down to concentrate on her day job. So there's another typo from the BBC. As chief executive of Prince's Trust charity. So she's stepping down as well. In a forward to the Commission, Diane Martina says there have been some evidence of success in boosting social mobility before the coronavirus pandemic, but renewed focus was now needed if Boris Johnson was going to meet his promise to level up opportunity. And so here we have Justine Greening, right? And her message was echoed by former Education Justine Greening. And so this is what annoys me so much about these politicians when they come out of Parliament or when they're no longer ministers, like, oh, you have to do this thing because it would be so great if you did this thing, when they don't do it. If we look at Justine Greening's voting record, you can see she always voted for reducing housing benefit for people. So if you can't, like I said, if you can't save or keep the money you have, it's very difficult to move up move up in the country, as in like financially wise. It's very hard to go up in terms of social mobility, to move up the ladder, because you can't save any money and therefore you can't buy a house and things like that. And so Justine Greening always voted for reducing housing benefit for social tenants deemed to have an extra bedroom. So she did that. Generally voted against welfare benefits. in line with prices. Almost always voted against paying higher benefits over long periods of time for those unable to work due to illness or disability. So she was another one who actively voted for poorer people, for people that couldn't work to have less money. That's one of the things that she did. Almost always voted for making local councils responsible for helping those in financial need afford their council tax and reducing the amount spent on such support. So she basically said to the councils, like, it's up to you to help people with their council tax, and that puts councils in a more vulnerable position. But if your council's stupid like mine, then I guess it doesn't really matter. Almost always voted for reduction on welfare benefits, and a lot of people on benefits are also in work. So it doesn't help them. It doesn't help them get out of that, and so it's just stupid. Almost always voted against public spending money to create guaranteed jobs for young people who have spent a long time unemployed. Here's another example of her not helping people, because if you can help someone get a guaranteed job for a few months, get some skills, that can help them longer term to get a job. But you voted against that. And so here you can see Justine Green's voting record is indicative of a person who didn't want to help poorer people move up the ladder. But what she did, if we look at the rest of her record, she wanted to keep the upper class up. And so here, generally voted against raising the threshold. Oh no, this one's a good one. Always voted for raising the threshold at which people pay income tax. That's a good one. Almost always voted for increasing VAT. That's a bad one. Because if you want to buy things, you got to pay VAT on it. Some things are exempt, like clothing and food, I believe. So another thing is you want to buy to improve your quality of life, VAT, bro, and that increases the cost of you buying things, which makes it hard for you to move up the chain, have a higher quality of life. Alcoholic drinks, that's not important. Plane tickets, not that important. Voted for a mixture of for and against lower taxes on fuel on motor vehicles. So this one's a slightly mixed one. So obviously lowering the tax on fuel is a great thing for your wallet. So it means you pay less for petrol, but tonight is worse for the environment, which means that you have costs going elsewhere. And so without diving into her full voting record there, it's quite mixed. But here's another one: consistently voting against increasing the rate of tax applied to income over 150,000. So she voted. So this was to do the top bracket of tax, which is 45, which is 45p, 45%, and increasing that to 50%, which is something Labour did. And so she was part of the group that lowered it to 45 and then didn't want to increase it. And so here you can see that if she wanted to help people with social mobility, she would have done this and then used that money to help poorer people, but she didn't. She generally voted for encouraging occupational pensions, so she wanted pensioners to go back into work. Generally voted against automatic enrolment. She always voted against a banker's bonus tax. So here's another one where she could have used this money, the tax money coming in from this, to reinvest it into help poorer people, but she didn't. Voted for a mixture for hire and against banks. Generally voted against an annual tax on expensive homes known as the mansion tax. So here again, this is another example of her not helping out poorer people. Always voted for reducing capital gains tax. Capital gains tax is a thing you only pay when you have things like shares. Okay, and who has shares? Typically, it's the richer people. So here again, this is another example of her helping out the rich people. So I don't want her to talk about you need a plan. You sit down, you sit outside, and you think about your voting record. Obama's another one. So I've found this article on Jacobin, and Jacobin, you really need to fix your website because this is embarrassing. This is absolutely embarrassing the way your website looks. Like, it's terrible, the formatting. I don't know if it's my screen, but like, what's this? What's this? What's this? Why is your title over here? So thanks, Obama. So Barack Obama thinks Medicare for all is a good idea. His support is welcome, but at this time we won't accept any compromise. So Barack Obama, post leaving the presidency, thinks Medicare for all is a great idea. He didn't push for it when he had a supermajority. He never pushed for it whilst he was in office. He went to the right wing plan, which is Obamacare, the single mandate plan where individuals need healthcare. So Obama's another one. You can sit outside as well, because you propped up your boy Biden. You didn't push for the guy who would have done this, so you can sit outside. And so we can see that social mobility is crumbling in this country, and that it's not a great situation if you're a person trying to move up the ladder. You're gonna have to work incredibly hard to get something like a deposit, which is you're talking about 20,000 to get a decent deposit on a house. 10%, a house is about 150,000. How are you supposed to afford to save when you can't even afford to live? And so look, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Comment, share, subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.